serving English teachers in South Korea and beyond. You've reached the Midnight Runner Podcast.
And it's time for another great podcast brought to you from the Midnight Runner. A special shout out to my guests overseas in the USA, Canada, Australia, Japan, wherever you may be. The number of listeners is growing steadily, and we'd like to see you back here, so please feel free to click on one of the buttons on the right-hand side of your screen. If you do that, you can find out when I add a new show. You can do that through Yahoo, Google, and of course, iTunes. Well, let's get into our next story, which is about a multicultural family who rented an apartment in Korea, but when they moved out, the landlord tried to keep a large chunk of their deposit without good reason. What did they do about it? Keep us running in the background while you surf, study, or play, and you'll find out. We are the Midnight Runner Podcast.
Anjima, Jugule. Don't even think about it. This seat belongs to the runner.
Do you know? Do you know? The Seoul Podcast.
Hello. Is this Doctor
Joe McPherson?
So a lot of people call this a beer gut. I call this a battery for a lovemaking machine.
Jennifer Young.
Yeah, I don't think they even told him to stop drinking. I think they were just like, don't burn down any more national monuments, dude.
Stafford Lumsden.
The number one top international crisis that no one really gives a shit about.
And the great King Sejong.
Damn straight.
The Seoul Podcast.
The international hub of podcasting.
Hi, this is Derek from the Midnight Runner. I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for joining us, and I'd also like to say that if you've got a business, product, or event you'd like to promote, please contact me at the email address listed at the top of the page. I'd be happy to produce an audio commercial for a specific show or add your banner for a small fee. With several hundred listeners tuning in each week, the Midnight Runner is a great way to advertise. Reach the foreigners you need to reach, and thanks again for listening to the Midnight Runner.
Podcasting to Korea without a criminal record check. We are the Midnight Runner.
Hello and welcome back to the Midnight Runner Podcast. Today's special guest has an interesting story for us. His name is Kevin, and he had a problem with his landlord. And have you ever wondered what would happen to your deposit if the landlord decides not to pay it all back? Well, Kevin went through that, and he's going to tell us about it. Kevin, please introduce yourself and tell us how long you've been in Korea.
Well, my name's Kevin, obviously. I've been in Korea for going on about a decade or so. I'm a teacher here, and I'm married, got a wife, and a small family, and that's about it.
Wow, so you had an apartment, and you had a problem with it. Could you tell me exactly what happened? Just go ahead into detail.
Well, about a year ago, almost exactly to the day, about a year ago, we were moving out of our apartment, and on moving day, in the morning, our landlord said that he was not going to return our deposit money because he found some small holes in the wall, and apparently we had scuffed up the floor. That was what he told us.
How much did you have wrapped up in the deposit, if I can ask?
Well, I mean, I don't want to go into specifics, but it was quite a bit. You know, it was chunse, when you have to put down the entire amount of key money.
Gotcha.
So we put down the chunse money, so it was quite a bit of money.
Uh-huh. And he just started picking things around the apartment that he said were wrong and basically deducting what he wanted to. Well, what did you do after that? Did you take him seriously? What, did you argue?
Well, after my wife stuck a knife in his eye, I pulled it out, and then we started...
that sounds like a plan.
Yeah, then we started negotiations. But basically, what could we do? We were moving out on that day, and as you know, in Korea, when you're moving out, typically at the same day or on the same day, you're giving your key money to somebody else. So they give you back the key money on that day, then you immediately transfer it to the to the landlord's account of your new apartment. Mm-hmm. So here this guy is. I mean, basically he's got us by the neck, so to speak. I mean, we can't do much about it because here he is. He's saying, I'm going to keep this money. It was $2.5 million of the deposit. He said, I'm going to keep $2.5 million for damages, non-existent damages. And frankly, there was nothing we could do about it because what had happened was another person was moving in on the same day. Now, in these situations, often what will happen is the people who live in the apartment will just refuse to leave. So if the landlord says, I'm not going to give you your money back, then one person whoever is living in the apartment at that time, they'll just say, okay, fine, you're not going to give me my money. So guess what? I'm not moving out. And they'll just march right back up from the Budongsan to their apartment, lock themselves in, and refuse to leave. And the movers they can tell the movers, get out. I'm not moving today. I'm not getting my money. I'm not moving out. And then it's pretty much game on from there.
That wasn't an option for you? Or?
That wasn't an option because what happened was the landlord came in and inspected our place, acted very friendly in a friendly manner. So we opened the door to him, so to speak. Then our movers came in and were packing up. And while our movers were packing up, the movers for the people moving in came, and they were actually moving stuff in while we were moving out.
So
and
your
I said,
landlord was being sly.
"Oh yeah, big time." I mean, this guy we call him the jerk. That's his nickname. So we'll just refer to him as the jerk. We don't even have to call him my landlord. Okay, so the jerk, he's pretty slick dude. So he decides, well, we're gonna outfox this guy, and we're gonna move in the new guy's stuff while you guys are moving out. So I mean, our hands were tied basically.
Yeah. Wow. So I mean, did you argue with him and just yell at him? What did you do?
Well, like I said, the wife entered into what was that saying in Star Wars negotiations? I forget what they said, but anyway, she entered into negotiations, finger quotes, with the guy, and pretty much told him where to go. But he knew he had the power, so he didn't have any reason to negotiate with us. And so basically what we had to do is scramble around and find $2.5 million because that was going directly into the new deposit. So we had to scramble around. We had to make phone calls. I was looking in our dressers to see if there were any coins lying around on the floor. I mean, we had to scramble to get that $2.5 million.
Did you take pictures of the damage just to use for later proof?
Good point. We did. And two things that happened. One, okay, he was pointing out the damages that we supposedly had done to this apartment. So I took pictures of all of those, all the little holes, the so-called scuffs on the floor, and some other random stuff that he pointed out. And then while the new people were moving in, this is the irony of it all, while the new people were moving in, they were scuffing up the floor, of course, and they were immediately and it was actually, get this, it was actually a small hagwon moving in. So they immediately were hanging up, ramming nails into the wall to hang up whiteboards and posters and stuff.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Did it scare them at all that this action was going on between you and the landlord? I wonder what they thought.
Good point. I talked to the guy that was moving in. I said, you realize this guy's a jerk? And he said, oh, no, actually, he just has a problem with your wife.
Yeah, the problem is she was angry that she was getting screwed out of 2.5 million won.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, the first thing that he said to us when he came in, he acted real friendly, and then the first thing he did when he started pointing out all those holes in the wall is he's like, well, I'm gonna have to charge you. And my wife kind of laughed, and she's like, no, that doesn't really happen here, and he was like, yeah, we're gonna have to do this. And I just got messy after that.
Wow. So what did you do? Did you take action right away?
Well, basically, we were in shock and awe for a couple of days, and fuming, and my wife basically made a few phone calls, and she found out that there is a place where you can go, a kind of a law office, kind of counseling office, that is free, apparently for, as far as I know, for people who earn under a certain amount of money. I believe it's, if your wages are below 2.5 million per month, you can use these law offices for free. They will counsel you for free. They don't represent you, but they will counsel you for free.
That figure's kind of a guesstimate, 2.5.
Well, I believe that was the number that my wife told me. The 2.5, I believe, is a firm number, and I believe these offices are located in most GUs, I believe, the areas of the city. You should be able to find one in your area of the city.
Maybe the Dong office or something.
Could be. I think ours was actually a little bit farther away than our Dong office, so that was actually, I think it's probably like per GU. Each GU might have a couple of them. So anyway, I'll tell you the name of that place. The name of the place in Korean is the Muryo Bumyul Gujo Gongdan. That's probably a horrible pronunciation. I'll try it again.
It's better than I do.
Muryo Bumyul Gujo Gongdan. So if you ever have to seek out one of those, good luck translating what I just said. So anyhow, she called those people and they said, yeah, come on down. And she went down there. This was probably about a week later. So we sat on this for about a week, I guess. Or it took us that long to figure out where to go. So she went down there, and the people were very nice, and they listened to our story, and they said, okay, well, here's the paperwork that you're going to need to fill out.
Was it a lot?
Well, I don't think it was a lot, but the interesting thing was they did have my wife write down her sort of side of the story, so to speak, our side of the story. So she actually had to write kind of a letter explaining our situation. So she filled out some forms, and then she also had to write a letter. And then what happened was, a little bit after that, those people at the law office turn those papers into the court for you, and that actually begins the process.
Is it like a real court, or is it what kind of court is it?
It's a real court, and I'll get to that a little bit later when I talk about, because that comes about a year later.
A year later. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll get to that a little bit later, and I'll explain about the court situation and how much fun that was a little bit later.
What was your landlord's reaction when he first found out you were seeking legal action against him?
Well, basically what happened was the law office turned in the papers to the court, and then what happens is the court sends a letter to the defendant informing him that he's being sued. And of course that can take, you're looking right there probably at a couple of weeks time. And then what happens is the defendant is given the opportunity to send a similar letter that we sent to the court explaining his situation, his side of the story, so to speak. So it's a plaintiff-defendant situation, just like it would be at home. So we give our side of the story, and he gives his side of the story. But so far, all of this is happening outside of court. We're just sending letters to court. So it probably took a few weeks for him to realize that we were serious about getting our money back.
Once he heard that, he probably realized you were serious about it. Did you get any reaction from him or any phone call?
Well, what happened was when he finally received the letter and then wrote his own letter, which probably happened about a month or a month and a half later.
Did he take his time doing it?
Well, with the Korean mail system, sometimes my stuff gets here on time, sometimes it doesn't. So, I don't know. I can't point the finger at him necessarily, but I'd like to. Yeah. Well, anyhow, what happened was the court took his letter exactly and sent us a copy of it, so we could see exactly what the defendant was saying we owed damages for, right? So we got actually a carbon copy of his letter, and then the next step was we had to write another letter to the court explaining why his claims were bogus. So it's a he said, she said kind of deal, and it's going back and forth, and somebody at the court, we don't know who, is reading these letters, and I guess they're sort of weighing the situation. So I think at this point, the court actually begins to look at the evidence, so to speak, and think about this case a little bit more seriously.
But
they don't talk to us.
It was like a judge or something.
I honestly, I couldn't tell you who received these letters at the court, but it was, an actual court of law, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And after that had happened, we were given a court date, actually. I should mention that this court date was given to us approximately 7 months after the process began. So here first, within the first, I would say two months, maybe a little bit more than 2 months, this whole letter sending thing is going on. And then we're finally given a court date, but it's scheduled, this is some 7 months later, basically.
Wow.
So
taking their sweet time doing it.
That's right. The wheels of justice and all that. So anyway, now we can get to the juicy part, and that is the court. So we arrive on our court date, and the courthouse is kind of similar to what you might find back home, wherever you're from, unless you're from, Vietnam or something. And we go up in there, and the judge is in there, and there are 2 tables, one for the plaintiff. Kind of, believe it or not, it looks a lot like Judge Judy's court.
Really?
Right. It looks just like the people's court, on TV back home. And there's a plaintiff's table, a defendant's table. There's a couple of, stenographers, a couple of people sort of milling around doing lawyer stuff, I guess. And then pretty much a bunch of old people who are probably suing each other over spitting on each other's foot or something like that. So, anywho, we go in there and we wait to hear my wife. There's one judge. And we were waiting for him to call my wife's name, and he finally does. And so she goes up to the table, and then he continuously calls the defendant's name, and defendant never shows. So basically, the case is moved back another month. Now, before I go on, I would like to say that at the time, my wife had given the judge some photos of the damages, the supposed damages. And at the time, the judge looked at those photos, And he said to my wife, to be honest, he said to us, this case is really unprecedented. I've never dealt with this before. And I thought to myself, yeah, right. Like Koreans don't try to cheat each other out of key money. Like that never happens. But anyway, in all fairness, he said that he himself had never dealt with this situation before.
He meant that it was so blatantly obvious that there wasn't such damage that you were being taken advantage of.
Exactly. Well, I hope that's what he meant. I think that's what he meant. So in any case, he looked at the pictures and he basically said, just from looking at the pictures, it appears as if this man doesn't really have a case, but come back and see us in a month. And we have to give him one more chance.
So chance for him to come back to the court and show up for the date that he never showed up with 1 month previous.
Exactly. Which, by the way, you don't actually have to, unlike back home where if you don't show up for a court date, you're fined or put in jail. Here, if you don't show up for a court date, there's no penalty whatsoever. So if you don't want to go to court on that date, then don't go.
So it's kind of a stalling tactic in favor of the person who's being sued, essentially.
You nailed it. Exactly. So he can collect interest on that monies for a little bit more time.
So it was another month before you actually got to see him in court.
We never actually did see him in court.
Really?
That's the good part.
Tell us about this.
So a month later, we enter the court again, go through the same rigmarole. Wife is called up to the table. The man doesn't show. The judge, he didn't have a gavel. I was hoping he would have a gavel and say, well, case closed, you win. But he didn't. He just said, well, guy's not here, you win. De facto. Basically, you win. So
this was from the first date that you filed the paper, or let's say from the date that you left the apartment. How long did this take?
We're talking about, at this point, 8 months to the second court date.
Wow.
We're now talking about 8 months. Well, from the time that we left the apartment, 8 months and some change. From the time that we filed the papers, the original paperwork from the law office, looking at about 8 months.
And he didn't pay right away, did he?
No, he did not. Go figure. So basically what happened was he didn't show up. The court ruled that we won the case. And so we go home and yay, we won, but we don't have any money. So what happens is at that point, the court sends a letter to the defendant saying, look, you lost. The government of Korea says you lost. Just pay the people and get on with your life, right? Well, the guy decides, no, I'm more important than the government of Korea. I'm not going to pay this. Screw you.
Was he an old guy, by the way? What was his age, roughly?
He was in his 40s.
Okay.
Yeah, in his 40s.
Older than you and wanted you to know it.
Maybe so. I think really he did have a grudge against my wife, and that goes back to some issues we had with him at the very beginning of our contract because he was trying to be a little bit shady, and my wife called him out on it, but we ended up renting from him anyway. Let that be a lesson to anybody out there who's thinking about renting from a guy who has some debt. He had some debt, and so we actually put down less key money than a lot of the other apartments in our area, but it was a risky deal. So we could have lost all of our key money if he had, really gone, bottom up, so to speak.
So do you think he was trying to save face in the end by what your wife did earlier?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of revenge. I think it was just a good old-fashioned...
and make some money on the side to pay those debts.
Not much money, but, just enough to make us angry, I think. Just enough to make us feel like, he had pulled one over on us, basically.
Right. So that was about 8 months. What happened next?
Well, the next part's the fun part. So they send him a letter. The guy gives the government of Korea the finger, says, I don't agree with you. You ruled against me, but whatever. So now it goes to the next stage. And the next stage is a bunch of, I shouldn't say this, but a bunch of government goons basically meet us at the guy's apartment. And these are like Matrix-looking dudes. I mean, they're in shades and like dark overcoats and they're black ties and they mean business. No smiles whatsoever, no greeting, just like, let's get this thing done. They told us they had like 15 of these to do that day.
Wow.
Which goes back to the judge saying it's unprecedented. I'm thinking, yeah, right, it is. Well, anyhow, we go up to the guy's apartment, knock on the door, bang, 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 bang. Doesn't answer.
So he was there probably, but hiding, or
well, he could have been working. I mean, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I guess he could have been working, or he could have been out jogging, or ripping off other people. Who knows? But in any case, they banged on the door, opened the door. Government of Korea is here. You owe some money to these people. Do the right thing. Blah blah blah. Nobody comes to the door. So the government people, they say, "Okay, go home, and we'll set a date and do this again a month later."
A month later.
So as you can kind of see the pattern here, the whole thing is really set up to give the defendant the chance to do the right thing.
Multiple chances to do the right thing.
Many chances to do the right thing. I mean, basically, at the end, the court is on its knees begging this guy, just do the right thing so we don't have to come and break down your door. Well, this guy didn't listen, and we did, in fact, have to go back and almost literally break down his door. So,
didn't you say that you had to basically pay to get his lock opened?
That's correct. So what happened is about a month later, we have another date. So we go back to his apartment, and this time we have the legal authority to break his lock and enter his apartment and put stickers on everything. Now, why would we want to do that?
Yeah, stickers. What's up with stickers?
The stickers are from the government, and basically anything that they put stickers on is going to be auctioned.
And they have a number, I assume, or something?
Well, it's just an official, it's kind of like a parking sticker. Looks a bit like a parking sticker. So they're going to take that sticker and they're going to put it on everything that has some value. And they actually have a list of items that they can put stickers on, I believe. Or they just know it, apparently. You can't just go in there and put stickers on everything. And the plaintiffs cannot put stickers on anything. The government people do that for you. In fact, we didn't even go into the house. The joke of it all was when we got to the house, they banged on the door and nobody answered. And then they banged on the door again. They said, look, we're going to come in. If you're there, you better tell us. Well, it turns out that the man, or I should say, the jerk's mother was in the house and his son was there too. Well, guess what? The guy said, look, we're going to come in here. So we had to hire a locksmith. So we paid about $100. The locksmith came out of our pocket.
Did you get the money back?
I'll save that for later.
Okay.
So anyhow, we hire the locksmith. He comes and he picks the lock expertly, I'll add. I mean, you couldn't even tell that he picked the lock. It wasn't like he broke the thing out, but he picked the lock nicely. But we did just wide open, open the door and surprise, they could have been naked walking around the house or something. Who knows? And the grandma's like, oh my God. And she says, oh, I thought you were from the church.
Yeah, right.
That was her excuse. So here are the government guys yelling at her saying, open the door. We're going to break it down. We're from the government. You lost. Oh, we thought you were from the church. So anyhow, the guys go in there. We stay outside. I don't know if we were even allowed to go in there, but we didn't because it would have been awkward with the jerk's kids were in there. And that would have been kind of, that would have been kind of awkward, I think. So, but it must have been awkward anyway. So the government types, the Matrix dudes walk in there and they sticker everything, the plasma TV and other junk, microwaves and whatnot. And that's that. And then we go home.
So they stickered everything. You went home. And then what? Did you get your money right away? Did the guy just say, oh, they've got stickers on everything, I have to pay? What did he do?
It's an interesting case because we were waiting from a phone call from somebody telling us, well, the guy paid. And there's 3 ways he can pay. He can pay his local government office, or he can pay the Budongsan, who we did the original transaction through, or he can directly pay us. So nobody contacts us for a whole month.
And those who don't know, Budongsan is like the rental agency, basically.
And so a month goes by, and we don't hear from him or from anybody else. And we're thinking, this is interesting. So now they stickered his stuff, so it's going to go to auction. Okay, so what happens is when they sticker the stuff, all of this stuff is going to go on an auction. And anybody, I don't believe anybody, that's not correct. I believe we could have bid, and his wife could have bid, which is interesting because she could have just bought all of it back. And then there's some official bidding sort of organization, like I will just call them the mafia, because they showed up in tracksuits driving an Ecus, which is a very expensive car, but in tracksuits. I mean, come on, these guys are mafia if you've ever seen it, right? So anyway, these guys are like the official like auction dudes, right? And they're the ones that are going to bid up the price and then, probably make me or somebody else try to buy this junk. Well, anyhow, we finally get a phone call, and it turns out that what had happened was apparently 2 or 3 days after they stickered his stuff, he went in and paid it to his local, I guess, government office. So we have to drive to Uijeongbu, to the government office, to pick up the money. He's given them cash, apparently. And when we get there, we have to fill out some paperwork. And the funny thing was, my wife said, well, why didn't you just call us a month ago, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Why did you wait a month?
Just too easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nothing is ever black and white or easy in this country. So what happened was they told us, who knows if this is the truth or not, but they told us that they wait until there are a certain number of people who need to receive their money, and then they call them all at once. A big spamming or calling or whatever you want to call
probably just giving the person time to get the money to you.
I could be, trying to make him take care of it himself and give it to us.
So his stuff was auctioned off for sure.
We put the stickers on his stuff about 3 days before Seoul. And
the big Korean holiday.
There you go. And I'm guessing that what happened was he was so embarrassed because I'm sure that he was probably the oldest son. So on Seoul, the family always gathers at the eldest son's house or at an uncle's house. I'm guessing he was the uncle or the eldest son, and everybody would have come over on Seoul, which is this huge holiday. I mean,
seen all the stickers.
And seen stickers on his plasma and not been able to watch their dramas, and it would have been a nightmare for the guy.
It would have been a talking point for the family at the time, I'd say.
He would have had to have peeled his face off the ground with razor blades. So basically the guy, I think we shamed him into paying is what happened. It was fortuitous that they put the stickers on his stuff about 3 or 4 days before Seoul, which gave him that opportunity to say, oh my God, everybody's going to come over here and see stickers, on the microwave that we need to use to cook this food for Seoul or whatever. So,
wow. So how long does it usually take between the stickers and getting the money generally?
Good question. According to what they told us, this is the process. You put the stickers on it and the person will usually pay. If they don't pay, they auction off the stuff, which will take place within. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how long it will take before the auction.
Far.
We didn't have to do that. It never went up for auction. And then, if they auction off the people's stuff, and that doesn't raise enough money to pay you back, then it goes to their apartment, and they can actually auction off the people's apartment or their car or something else, that's large. Now, what I did hear was that oftentimes what will happen is the defendant will actually transfer ownership of everything they own to their wife's name. And then guess what? If you want any of that stuff, you have to start the process all over and sue the wife. And so we were lucky that this guy, I don't think he really had enough time to do all that because you cannot remove those stickers legally. So actually, if he had tried to remove any of those stickers, he would have faced fines or possible jail time. So
really?
If the government comes in and puts stickers on your stuff, do not touch that stuff.
I see.
Leave it alone. So I think he realized we had him in a kind of bind.
Wow. Well,
just like he had us in a bind a year earlier.
So total timeline here was how long?
The whole process from filing the original court papers was about 11 months. But I should point out, the people at that office said that this was almost a kind of miracle case in that it happened so quickly.
Really?
So, yes. Usually, yeah, exactly. Yeah, guffaws around the room. That was quick. 11 months was quick by their estimation. So if you get into a sort of a scrape like this, I just hope that they don't take a lot of money. I mean, I guess we were, quote, lucky that he only took a small amount of money, if you call 2.5 million small, but I suppose that they could try and do something silly like keep your key money or take half of it or a quarter of it, and then you're without that for an entire year. I mean, it's a pretty big deal, pretty big situation.
The whole thing with Junsei, we'll say, it really leaves you feeling as a foreigner like the person renting your apartment has total power over you and your money, doesn't it? That's something that makes foreigners really uncomfortable about the system, really.
It did. Now that I know a little bit more, now that I've gone through this process, and I know that the system can work, the thing that I will do differently next time is that when we are moving out of our apartment, I will not step foot outside of my apartment until my wife gives me a phone call and says, I have the money in my hand, and then I will allow the movers to start moving our stuff.
So some good advice for people out there. Good advice. Don't step foot out of your apartment until you get the money, and don't let someone else move in until you get that money.
And if you're alone, if you're a foreigner here by yourself, obviously you need to have a friend, probably a Korean friend, somebody that you trust, come and stay in the apartment. You maybe even lock the door or whatever while the movers are in there, packaging up your stuff. And basically, don't let the movers take anything out of your apartment until you have that money in hand.
it's kind of sad that it comes down to that, basically. But you got to do what you've got to do to save your money.
It's an issue. It all comes down to an issue of trust. And you have to trust the landlord that they're going to do the right thing, but you can protect yourself in some small ways.
Right. Well, I might revisit this in another podcast sometime and talk about renting an apartment. I'm in the process of that right now. And just watching my wife go through the motions of having to check to make sure that the person renting the apartment doesn't have a huge loan out on it, and making sure that they don't take out a loan between the time you rent the apartment and the time you actually move in. There are a lot of little landmines you have to look out for, and it pays to check them out. Otherwise, you could end up in a bad situation. Wow. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And wow, great stuff. Anyway, take care, and hope to have you back again on the show.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope to, if I have any more adventures, hopefully I won't have any more adventures in the future, but if I do have any more adventures in the future, hopefully my wife and I will be able to sort those, and then I will be able to share that information with you again.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Bye-bye.